Swampy, Southern Gothic, politically corrupt. Louisiana is a perfect backdrop for folklore characters, especially cryptids. A couple months back, I bought this print called Cryptids of America, Louisiana from an Etsy shop called Cicada Shack. In it are 12 regionally based cryptids that creatively form this cool illustrated outline of the state of Louisiana, though the north part of the state is a little light, as you'll soon find out. So today I figured, using this map as a guide, we dive into the history of all 12 of these creatures, some of which as a former Louisiana person I was familiar with, and some I was not. And if you like this artwork or want to check out other cryptid state prints from Cicada Shack, I've left the link down below for you to go grab one for yourself. First up in the northwest portion of the map is the Lumberjack of Bossier. Back in the 1800s, the Shreveport-Bossier City area was a powerhouse in the timber industry, but with this economic prosperity came many dangers for the lumberjacks harvesting the timber, including the risk of fatalities by fallen trees or loose logs rolling over them. Timber excursions were usually isolated events too, putting workers in camps far from civilization where things like violence and alcoholism could run rampant. When you mix these dreary conditions with men dying on the job, naturally stories of fallen lumberjack spirits with unfinished business begin to sprout up over the years. There is no widely known lumberjack cryptid figure per se, but instead the Lumberjack of Bossier represents the essence of all lumberjacks from this region, lost to the risks of their unpredictable profession. However, you can thank 2008 Internet for the one story I was able to find on the subject from a post on ghostofamerica.com. Here, a poster named Rick recalls an encounter with a ghoulish lumberjack and his dead daughter at the Anthony Products Mill in Plain Dealing, a small town outside of Bossier City. Now, this is pretty par for the course when it comes to telling ghost stories on 2008 Internet, but sometimes the only thing you have to go off of is what a dude named Rick can offer you. Next, at the very top of the map, we have the Devil's Toy Box. Now, this cryptid has a more vague location, with the story only specifying that it's some 3 hours from New Orleans in North Louisiana. This is the story of a very creepy cabin. Farmer Graves' Haunted Orchard is a Halloween fright farm with an attraction known as the Devil's Toy Box, a small windowless cabin. Inside the house, the walls are covered top to bottom with giant mirrors. Legend says anyone who goes inside cannot remain more than 5 minutes before either being driven insane, having a heart attack, or experiencing some other bout of hysteria. The longest anyone has managed to remain in the cabin was a man who lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds, but afterwards was never able to speak again. They say once you stare into the house's giant mirrors for too long, the devil jumps out and steals your soul away, even sometimes by flaying you. This may sound very familiar to fans of the Hellraiser film franchise, and for good reason, because it's partially inspired by it. In reality, this is a popular creepypasta written by Joel Fairley for Thought Catalog's Creepy section, their own version of Reddit's No Sleep. Funnily enough, Fairley's decision to not give the Devil's Toy Box any specific location was intentional. Doing so, he thought, might encourage kids to seek out places they shouldn't, as they've been prone to do with other creepypasta legends. Now, I am not completely sure if an inanimate object can qualify as a cryptid, but like I said, North Louisiana is short on cryptid lore, so satanic Hellraiser hut you get. Over on the northeast part of the map, we have a figure called the Wild Girl of Catahoula. Named after Catahoula Parish where she was first reported to have been seen, the Wild Girl has several newspaper recorded sightings from the late 1800s. The first came in July 1888 in Harrisonburg's Catahoula News. In the article, it tells of a girl who stole a goose from a farm that was chased into the woods by several search parties. Witnesses claim to have identified her as a girl with a club foot and that she was possibly the abandoned child of a local gypsy woman. 2 months later, another sighting was reported near a creek in LaSalle Parish. Here, more details were described about the girl. She was said to be around 16 years old, 4.5 feet tall with long, beautiful brown hair, between 125 and 140 pounds, and carrying an old knife. She was said to be a ferocious, feral-looking being, speaking only in gibberish, and was as fast as a deer with the ability to clear a 7-foot route. No clubfoot was identified, but they said the girl did walk with a limp. The third sighting was reported in the St. Martinville Weekly Messenger. When 2 men fishing heard the dying squeal of a pig not far away, they went to investigate. What they stumbled upon was a girl standing on a log, staring back at them, holding a dead pig in one hand and a knife in the other. Following this third incident, many began to smell a hoax though. The Lake Charles Echo even alleged this was an effort by Alexandria businessmen to cash in on the initial tales. However, more sightings continued over the next 3 years. She was next spotted in Pineville in 1890, running away at what observers said was an inhuman speed. Her last mention was from Franklin Parish in 1891, where she was again described as a powerful beast covered in hair and carrying a knife or sword. The Wild Girl is definitely one of the more plausible ones of the 12 cryptids on this list, so I really want to believe that some version of this girl actually existed at some time. But another part of me also suspects this was a very bored newspaper writer trying to draw up some excitement in late 19th century rural Louisiana. Next up, on the west side of the map, we have Lying Horse Rock. Lying Horse Rock is exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant rock shaped like a horse's head. But the real caveat is that there's cursed treasure buried beneath it. I was able to find a few old newspaper clippings on this one. The first, from a 1957 issue of the Monroe Morning World, tells the story about an infamous clan. John West was a bitter Civil War veteran who, following the war, disguised himself as a minister and formed the notorious West Clan. Later known as Reverend Devil, West and his clan regularly robbed, plundered, and murdered across areas of North Louisiana, while committing heinous crimes like murdering babies and burning churches down. Eventually, the clan was caught and executed, but the legend says beforehand, John West buried all of his loot under a certain landmark, the Lying Horse Rock. But the Reverend Devil left the area and treasure cursed, afflicting anyone who attempted to unearth what lay beneath. This curse subsequently seemed to be validated by another newspaper story in 1937. While traveling in the area, three men, John Morgan, Dudley Lang, and Harley Bozeman, came upon Lying Horse Rock. Morgan, familiar with the story of John West, recalled it to the other men while sitting atop the landmark. It wasn't long after Morgan was then struck and killed by a truck. A month later, Dudley Lang died of some disease, and Bozeman too fell ill but was able to recover, proving that just being in the mere presence of the rock meant certain doom for some. But even with the thing being potentially cursed, the amount of pockmarks on the rock indicates that hasn't stopped anyone from trying to dig up the treasure that's allegedly beneath it. But I can't imagine over 100 years of inflation would make cursed treasure worth it. Now we're getting into the southern region of the state. And first up is arguably the most famous Louisiana cryptid, the Cajun werewolf, the Rougarou. Coming from the French word for werewolf, the loup-garou, French Acadians first brought tales of the creature with them when they arrived from Nova Scotia in the late 1700s. Later, as the Cajun French language and dialect developed, the name evolved from loup-garou to Rougarou. This is your standard werewolf cryptid, a bipedal creature with the head of a wolf or a dog with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. For years, Cajun parents have used the Rougarou as their go-to boogeyman to pull children back into line. The most regular phrase I've always heard is that if you don't behave, then the Rougarou would get your toes. More so, you can be cursed and turned into a Rougarou if you look one in the eye or you break your Catholic Lenten vow. Surprisingly, the full moon does not play a part in any Rougarou transformation lore. Now here's a very established list of how-tos to change a Rougarou back into a human. The first is if one has been transformed for 101 days, they can turn back by biting another person and passing on the curse to them. The second way is to track down a witch to turn them back. A more sophisticated method includes placing 13 pennies on your front doorstep. The legend says that a Rougarou cannot count past 12, so when the beast approaches your house at night, this will send it into an endless loop until A, the sun comes up and it runs away, or B, it gets so confused that it turns back into a human. Finally, there are two foolproof ways to protect yourself from a Rougarou. The first is of course to carry around a piece of silver, and the second is to cut its head off. Down in Houma, there is an annual Rougarou festival held every October. It's your typical Louisiana festival filled with great food and music, but most importantly, people come out dressed in their best Rougarou attire. The Audubon Zoo in New Orleans also has its own popular Rougarou homage that people seem to love online. The cryptid is so popular that the New Orleans Pelicans considered the Rougarou as a potential mascot before settling on the Louisiana state bird instead. Next, down towards the southeastern portion of the map is a specific New Orleans cryptid, the Ursuline Vampires. In 1728, New Orleans was nothing more than a fledgling city under French rule, occupied by mostly men who were fur trappers, explorers, or traders. With these men needing more female companionship, France decided to send a handful of women to New Orleans. But when they arrived, most were found to be, for a lack of a better term, unbecoming, which some speculate this first group of ladies really helped lay the groundwork for New Orleans' legendary sinful vibe. So the Bishop of Quebec then decided to handpick a group of women from France considered to be more suitable wife material and sent them by ship to the port city. When the ship arrived, it said that when the women unboarded, their skin was so pale, they immediately reddened and blistered in the Louisiana sun. These women also carried small travel boxes called casquettes, earning them the title Casquette Girls. Now just consider the semantics. Casquettes is very similar to caskets. These women stepped off the boat and immediately burned in the sunlight. This is a pretty convenient way to connect these girls actually being vampires. The sisters of the Ursuline convent were initially in charge of housing the casket girls until they could be paired with a husband. But when they started to be mistreated by their new husbands, King Louis IV ordered them back to France. There is a room in the old Ursuline convent where the sisters stored the packed casquettes for the women in preparation for their return to France. This room was always known to be locked with the windows shut tight. The legend says that when the sisters went to retrieve the luggage, they found the casquettes empty. They searched high and low for the contents, but they were never found. Sensing something evil afoot, the sisters then sealed the room and shutters with nails blessed by the Pope. Whether this was a mission accomplished by the casket girls for smuggling vampires into New Orleans, or these girls were vampires themselves, both scenarios create a spooky tale suitable for New Orleans' gothic and vampire-esque setting. The old Ursuline convent today is a very popular ghost tour destination in New Orleans, so next time you're down there, eat your heart out. Because vampires. Alright, never mind. To the southwest part of the map, we have another regional South Louisiana cryptid, the Leech. Though the Rougarou is the most notable Louisiana cryptid, there's an argument to be made that the Leech is more appropriate to be the flagship cryptid for the state, being an alligator swamp humanoid creature. The Leech has some overlap with another cryptid from this list, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, but we'll get to that in just a bit. The Leech is another creature derived from Cajun legend. The most common story is that these are the lost spirits of unbaptized children. A leech will wander through the swamps, upending unsuspecting boats drifting by, pulling their victims down to their watery graves. There's also a second tale of Native American origin about the leech. In that story, a lost baby was taken in by alligators and raised as their own, later adopting typical alligator features like the green hide and sharp teeth. Just think of Danny DeVito's version of the penguin. And the telltale sign of a leech's presence in nearby waters is when one starts to hear ominous scratching beneath their boat. I can tell you this is a legitimately frightening thought if you've ever been out in the Louisiana swamps during the dead of night. You hear all kinds of unsettling and unnerving noises. Right next to the leech on the map is the eerie smoke it's blowing out, the Feu Follets. Now, mysterious lights are easy to label cryptids. They often come and go with no explanation, and can invoke both feelings of happiness and dread. Feu Follets is a French term that means marsh fire or crazy fire. More eloquently, it's described as an uneasy or joyful feeling, illuminating consciences and hearts. And basically what this phenomena equates to is a Cajun will of the wisp, the legendary ghost light seen by travelers at night. Sometimes called swamp fairies, Feu Follets have been seen in different sizes, but usually never bigger than a candle flame. The standard interpretation is that Feu Follets are spirits from loved ones passed on, returning to say their final goodbyes. In other cases, they are bad omens, an evil spirit setting a trap to draw their victims deeper and deeper into the swamp until they drown or get lost forever. One Lake Charles cemetery has reported numerous Feu Follet sightings since the 1840s. Elsewhere, one story was told about a group of friends who went exploring near Gonzales. In this story, several lights seen in the distance start to charge the group while growing in size, causing them to panic and flee. Today, it's easy to scientifically rationalize Feu Follets. Mysterious lights are often explained away by emissions from natural gases like methane rising from the earth. But science is boring and spooky rules. So suck it, methane. At the very bottom center of the map is a recent addition to Louisiana lore, the Berwick Monster. Named after the town of Berwick where the creature was first spotted, I recall this story very well when it first aired on TV back in 2010. When a hunter from the area stumbled upon his destroyed hunting camera he had set up in the woods, he was surprised to find the SD card inside unharmed. When he went to check the footage to see who the culprit was, he was stunned to find this ghoulish alien-looking creature gazing dead into the camera's eyes. Now 2010 was still a relatively good time period where you could spook people with unexplainable found footage. I definitely remember getting chills the first time I saw this, and I was also deathly afraid of aliens. And here was one just in my backyard. But people quickly began to piece together evidence of a carefully planned hoax. The first sign was when the hunter who issued this footage to the TV station chose to remain anonymous. Secondly, it's just too convenient that his camera gear was destroyed, but somehow his SD card managed to survive the thrashing. People also put together that this was an easy Photoshop job, possibly achieved by someone dressing up as the creature and being superimposed with animal limbs to attain its creepy proportions. The final nail in the coffin was when it was discovered that the hunter actually uploaded the picture to the website of Wild Game Innovations, a company that sold hunting cameras and deer attractants. On the website's version of the video, the logo for Wild Game Innovations was included for everyone to see, putting to rest that the Berwick Monster was probably nothing more than a viral campaign by Wild Game Innovations to sell their state-of-the-art camera equipment. Because you never know what kind of eerie things you'll capture on a Wild Game Innovations camera. Free commercial. But this monster's 15 minutes didn't stop here, as it served as inspiration for another popular creepypasta legend, the Rake. Let's head back east to this creature, the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Just north of New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain, near the city of Slidell and the Pearl River, is about 1,000 acres of swamp called Honey Island, due to its high bee population. What's said to reside there is a creature well documented during the 1960s and 70s, the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Back in the early 1960s, two men went scouting for hunting grounds in a secluded area of the swamp, when they noticed from afar a large animal feeding on another. When they drew their guns to protect themselves, the animal stood up on both feet, locked eyes with the men, then took off running. It was described as being over 7 feet tall, with dingy hair, yellow eyes, and casting a terrible stench. One of these men was Harlan Ford. Ford spent the better part of the next 10 years trying to gather evidence to prove this creature's existence. At some point, he discovered a mauled boar with its throat ripped out, and next to it a huge set of 3-toed and webbed footprints. He then used liquid plaster to cast a mold of these prints. Ford was later featured on the 1970s series In Search Of, talking about this beast. Ford's public testimony is what raised the notoriety of the monster's legend, something that created backlash from locals, who alleged Ford was either trying to claim the hunting territory by scaring people away, or was trying to profit off creating a hoax. Ford did always bring a video camera with him on his excursions, but for some reason no footage was ever released. That is, until his granddaughter, Dana Holyfield, found some lost footage from Ford's collection after he passed away, that shows what appears to be a bipedal creature about 100 yards away walking through the thick of the woods. Dana has since released many publications and documentaries on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. When asked why Harlan Ford never released this footage himself, Dana claims he probably didn't want anyone to mistake the beast for something else and shoot it. Like I said earlier, the monster is sometimes also referred to as the Leech, but I'm not sure how one might assume an alligator creature and a Bigfoot could be the same thing. But then I found a case that might explain this mix-up. Some believe that the Honey Island Swamp Monster is actually the offspring of a chimpanzee and an alligator after a circus train crashed near the Pearl River, resulting in several circus animals escaping into the swamp. But imagining a chimp and an alligator getting it on is just a union I just don't want to picture. Staying in the greater New Orleans area, the next cryptid on the list is this thing trying to take a bite out of the Honey Island Monster's foot, the Grunch. Legend says that somewhere just east of New Orleans, near the community of Little Woods, is a lost and overgrown path called Grunch Road. This is home to the Grunch, the Louisiana equivalent of the chupacabra, often described as a sickly-looking creature with reptilian skin and sometimes even sporting the head of a goat. Here, the Grunch stalks out any prey and humans wandering nearby. But the two origin stories I found, boy, they're out there. The first comes from a tale about New Orleans' most famous voodoo queen, Marie Laveau. One day, a deformed infant baby boy was brought to Laveau that some claimed was Satan's offspring. To prevent the child from later reproducing more of Satan's spawn, Laveau proceeded to cut the boy's testicles off. Thinking she had neutralized any future threat, she was left in horror when the two testicles each took shape into an individual creature, a male Grunch and a female Grunch. The beasts then attacked Laveau before escaping into the night. Don't worry, the second one is great too. The other origin tale for the Grunch is that their species comes from a clan of inbred albinos and dwarves driven out of New Orleans and into the swamps. Over time, these humans became more feral and cannibalistic, slowly morphing into Grunches. There are 3 noteworthy accounts of Grunch sightings. The first comes from Civil War times. While camping out on the banks of the Mississippi River, Confederate soldiers were ambushed by a horned demon that suddenly emerged from the swamps. Eventually, the creature was able to be driven away with rifle fire, but not before tearing 2 soldiers to shreds. This version of the Grunch is commonly referred to as the Chalmette Devil, named for the area just east of New Orleans. The second Grunch account is the streetcar incident of 1909. New Orleans streetcar driver Elmer Castine claimed he was minding his business when his car was suddenly attacked by some unknown hairy beast that gnawed and clawed away at his windows before taking off. This account actually made nationwide news, sparking new interest in the legend. The third is from post-Hurricane Katrina in 2005. With New Orleans left flooded and devastated following the storm, many reported sightings of the Grunch began to pop up. The assumption was that the Grunch had been driven out of its lair by the hurricane and was now wreaking havoc on the city out of vengeance. But the only real Grunch you need to concern yourself with is Benny Grunch and the Bunch, because Grunch Road, it just ain't there no more. Finally, rounding out the list in the southwest part of the map is this, a coffin cutter, or a crawfish. Just like the alligator-esque leech, Louisiana is required to have a crawfish cryptid. Red and white crawfish are a beloved Louisiana delicacy, but there are actually over 450 species of the crustacean that many never see inside a boiling pot. One intimidating variation is known as the devil crawfish. While similar in size to your standard red and white crawdads, these are notable for their more greenish color, massive claws, and the ability to burrow up to 20 feet into the ground. With so many South Louisiana cemeteries covered with crawfish mud holes, the regular story is that devil crawfish will dive into people's graves, cut open their coffins, and feast upon their rotting flesh. And so if devil crawfish wasn't menacing enough, these creatures also earned the go-to moniker, Coffin Cutter. Consider it revenge for boiling these suckers. There you go, 12 cryptids from Louisiana. Tell me down in the comments below which other notable Louisiana cryptids are sorely missing from this map, or if I missed something important pertaining to these particular cryptids. I'll see you next time.